I think we need to accept gender nonconformity
Mhm.
as a whole. I think that's one area where the right gets it wrong, because once we see somebody that's gender nonconforming, then they're also kind of cascaded out a little bit too, right?
Mhm.
And so we kind of have to allow gender nonconformity to be accepted, because you're right. What this So Lisa Lippman did a study in 2018, and that's the study that you're referring to where it was 80% of the people in the study that were flagged for the study ended up desisting by the age of 16, and then the 20% went on to possibly, be trans. The issue with that study, and I used to think that this study was flawed actually, because it took anybody who is gender nonconforming, not just people who were diagnosed with gender dysphoria or anything like that. It took anybody who was gender nonconforming and put them in the study. The issue is that we're seeing now is they're telling anybody who's gender nonconforming that you're probably trans,
Mhm.
and that becomes the issue. And then it's like, okay, now you got to medicalize, you have to do all this, and you have to figure it out. And so once you put somebody on puberty blockers, then it's like 98% chance that they're going to go on to then take cross-sex hormones. And now again, then you see what the detransition rates starting to raise, and that's the issue. Also, what's happening, and this has happened um, recently in Scotland, they tried to have their gender recognition bill, which basically lowered the age that you could change all your documentation. So you could change your documentation to, say male, say the opposite sex
Mhm.
at 16 instead of 18. It also doesn't require a diagnosis of gender dysphoria. It also removes it from you, basically socially transitioning, living as the opposite sex for 2 years down to 3 months. So it's basically you can self ID into whatever category you want, which has all other, has a whole bunch of other ramifications that could come with that. Um, but I guess I'll go back to your original question too, to say there is. I mean, you mentioned Abigail Schreier earlier. Her book, Irreversible Damage, talks a lot about this because there is the social contagion factor. One of the reasons I started getting involved again was back in 2018. I saw this coming, and I posted on a Reddit forum that said that trans trenders are real. So trans trenders are basically those who are trans because it's becoming trendy.
Mhm.
I said they are real, and when the detransition rate skyrockets, it's going to be hurt actual trans people because of the backlash. I was banned from trans Reddit groups for saying that.
Mm.
And so it becomes this whole thing, and they don't want to acknowledge what's going on. And so it's interesting because when you have like the rapid onset gender dysphoria, that creates a whole different set of problems, because almost every transsexual that I know that ends up going on and it being the right cause for them, they have thoughts and remembering of the time like when they were like 4 or 5 years old. At the moment they became self-aware, they knew that something was different and that's what they were doing. So it was, but when you have people saying, well, I just figured this out, or this, I just started feeling this way, in puberty and stuff like that, that's when it kind of starts to blur the lines. And when I say that everybody at the age of 4, every transsexual knew something was different at the age of 4. I also use it's a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle is not a square. So everybody that feels that way at the age of 4 is not necessarily trans either, and that's part of the issue that we're seeing now too, is people are saying that, oh, babies in the womb know that they're trans. It's like, no, that's not the
I think
case.
I saw that there was something that was talking about trans babies, and I was like, they're not even awake yet. They're still kind of in this
No.
weird theta asleep phase for like the first 6 weeks. What are you talking about? That's the most political headline I've ever
Yeah.
seen.
Well, we call that transhousing by proxy, because it's something, again, it's these woke, uh, or these progressive upper middle class white women that have been told for so long that simply by being who they are oppressors. And so in order to finally get some oppression points, they can say, look at my trans child, I'm such a good parent, look at me, like I am no longer an oppressor, I am, you know I'm such a good parent. And so
Mm.
that is, they're using their children for those woke points.
So going back to the importance of accepting gender nonconformity and then gender dysphoria, are there like any observable differences between the two? Because I agree, I think gender nonconformity, that like gender expression, that is a huge spectrum, right? Like, not
Yeah.
everyone is the epitome of a feminine woman, and not everyone is the epitome of a masculine man. A lot of us exist somewhere along that gradient, and even
Hmm.
your mood can change, like what you want to wear or the activities you want to do that day. So, like, just completely discounting tomboys or feminine men, like, that just seems really regressive to me. So,
It is.
what's the difference between, let's say, just a tomboy and someone who's actually experiencing gender dysphoria?
So yeah, I mean that's a great example. Tomboys, and feminine boys too. Is most time feminine boys just are gay men that like pretty things, and why wouldn't you like pretty things kind of thing. Tomboys the same way. There is a huge difference between how you express yourself and like what you're drawn to, the types of things that you like to do. You might be a girl, you like cars and all this stuff, all these things that are based on stereotypes.
Mhm.
Um, where in gender dysphoria, and this is actually why I don't like gender dysphoria being labeled as a delusion either, because it's actually the opposite. With gender dysphoria, when I actually look at myself in the mirror, I see everything about myself that makes me male and that I don't, and I'm uncomfortable with that. Tomboys don't experience that same thing. They just go to what they're attracted to, and they just do they do their thing. Whereas me, it has nothing to do with those stereotypes. It just looks, it's the secondary sex characteristics that I have that make me feel uncomfortable, expressing who I am in that regard. I mean, in a lot of ways, I'm kind of the same way. I mean, in stereotypically, I would be more of a tomboy in a lot of situations, but then I like pretty things too. So it's just the thing, like you said, everybody's kind of on this spectrum. But gender dysphoria is very keen on, again, secondary sex characteristics and how you're perceived by the world.